Hello, it's been a while. So one of the videos on my channel that has been viewed the absolute most is my video about Gabbie Hanna's poetry, comparing it to Bo Burnham's poetry, and I thought that was a very interesting video, and I think a lot of you also thought the same. When I learned that she would release a second book, I was very intrigued and I ordered it immediately. I bought the book and I read it completely. It's actually quite long. It has like 245-ish pages. The blue stickers are actually pages that I thought were cool because of the illustrations, not necessarily because of the poem. The green sticky notes are the poems that I actually liked, so I have to say that there are some poems that I really do enjoy in this book. The red ones are poems that I think are unnecessary, boring, stupid, or that I just hate. Near the middle of the book, I stopped putting red ones in because I just thought that it was a little bit, too much and too harsh. I'm not here to hate on Gabbie Hanna, but when it comes to a work, if criticism is valid, then it should be given, because that's the only way that you will learn to improve. In one of her videos, she mentions that this book is an improvement on her previous one, and her editors and publishers agree. And I'm not really sure. I read this book twice to be sure that I would be able to cover enough, but the feeling that I had during this whole book, and this is maybe my overall criticism, is that I was just bored. I was very, very bored. I also made a list of the themes that I saw in this book, and there were only like 5-ish themes that came back again and again and again and again. I mean, when you have a poem collection, I expect there to be a multitude of different themes. I expect to be challenged on subjects that I haven't even thought about yet. But I feel that Gabbie sat down and had a theme in mind and wrote different poems for that theme. And instead of taking away a lot of the poems that were super similar, she just crammed them all in this book. That's why there are so many red ones, actually, because I really do not like it when people write the same things over and over. Some of these are very similar to the poems in her first book even, and that really annoyed me. As I go through this book, I see so many things that I don't like, but let's first start with some positive things. Let's start with some of the poems that I actually liked. I did like the poem Distance. Little by little, pebble by pebble, speck by speck of dust, the mountains eroded, leaving a canyon between the two of us. The whispers were bellowed, resentments were echoed, across a cleft so grand, all you needed to close the gap was to reach out for my hand. It is not like... Ooh, it's windy outside. Ooh. As I was reading it, I was in a certain rhythm. I liked it. It was nice. It was a good poem. So bravo. This one is also one that I like. It's called Necro, but I have to say I really feel the Bo Burnham influence in this poem, because he also does something similar about his dad in a certain poem, but I'll just read it because this is actually a nice one as well. I wish you were dead, not because I hate you, but because I love you so much. It's too hard knowing that you're walking around all breathy and pulsy and not decomposy. And I can't have you. I want your outsides to match my insides. I want them to be all still and rotting and soon to be forgotten. I want to know that the reason you're not calling is your fingers have turned to dust. I fantasize that the reason you don't think about me is the worms have eaten your memory. It's much kinder to say I can't have your heart because it no longer beats. Let me down gently, just die already. She was writing about something visual, something tangible. She made some fun sentences like breathy, pulsy, and not decomposy. It's just creative. So bravo for that as well. I do like the poem Necro. I think this is one of my favorite poems of her. It's on page 81 and it's called Misophonia. Ha, baby, you're so cute when you do that thing where you take such a big bite of food that your jaw pops when you try to chew. And by chew, I mean chomp your food so loud that it sounds like two horses making out, with mouths full of spaghetti and maggots. It's so adorable that I want to remove every single one of your teeth and put them in a blender, until they're just a fine white powder that I can mix with almond milk and make you suck down silently through a straw, and ingest it without making that super endearing, painfully precious, mind-numbingly lovable sloshing sound. I really like this one. This might be my favorite poem of the whole bunch, so I do want to commend her on that. And this is why it frustrates me, because this is proof that she can make something interesting that stems from a very simple idea that has been done before, to be very honest. But she can do it. Like, it's right here. She has the power to be able to write cool things. The same thing for another poem. The poem is called Useless on page 88. It's a delightfully devastating, heart-wrenchingly hopeful, gleefully grim, terrifyingly tranquil, excitingly excruciating, painfully pleasant thing to not need you anymore. I like that the sentences delightfully devastating, gleefully grim, excitingly excruciating are horrible sentences. They're talking about something horrible, and the ones after that are actually quite nice. So it's... And she plays with a lot of different words. The vocabulary is nice here. It's nice to read. So I like it. Oh, I did really want to read this poem before I cut off my camera and go into the negative stuff, because there is a poem called Blind, and it says for Molly. I believe that this poem is meant for Molly Burke. Lolled when I saw this illustration. It's Braille or whatever, however you pronounce it in English. It's Braille, and I mean, it's printed on a page. It's not as if she's gonna be able to... What a cursed blessing to be forced into guessing the contents of a heart without the costume of pride. A beast or a beauty, all comes down truly to not what can be seen, but what festers inside. No shallow perception means no misconception. You can't be distracted by the vanity dance. It makes me wonder who chose this power of the shield from deception if given the chance. This is so good, and it's so nice that it was also written for someone. That might have been the reason why it was better than some others, but it's gorgeous. I love it. Okay, I'm gonna read 2 more poems that I really thought were good, and I really want them out there in the world, because I feel that a lot of people are always putting more attention to the negative stuff, which I will do as well. But I want you to know that there are some gems in this book. So this poem is called Assault on page 149. I never told anyone because I accepted a 5th glass of wine. I never told anyone because maybe I was a little too flirtatious at dinner. I never told anyone because I let him into my apartment. I never told anyone because maybe I could have been a little louder with my stop, a little firmer with my no. I never told anyone because I didn't have any bruises. I never told anyone because I didn't hit him. I didn't try to push him off, because I froze when my words weren't powerful enough, because he was stronger than me and I felt that in his weight. I never told anyone because no one wants to hear the story of the girl who made bad choices and didn't fight back. Thank you for letting me tell you. On its own, the poem is quite good. Nearing the end, it kind of loses its rhythm, just technical things, but this is quite a strong poem because it touches on all the, rape culture things that are going around, that it's always the girl's fault that she's too flirtatious and that she doesn't say no firmly enough. I mean, I'm not sure if I should talk about this, but I am aware of the situation with her and Jessie Smiles, and I do feel that this is kind of hypocritical in a sense. Like, this is a very good poem, and she really makes a point of it being that strong, but I'm not gonna give my opinions, but I just wanted to share that I feel a little bit like icky when I read it. And then the other poem that I would love to read to you, it's a little bit longer, it's called Ramble, but I think it's worth it because this is again one that I put a sticker at, but I also wrote wow. So Ramble. You are a person, a living human organism. Everyone you meet is also a person, a living human organism. When you are looking at a person, a living human organism, they are also looking at you, a person, a living human organism. And as you look at each other, people, living human organisms, you are experiencing 2 totally unique, alternate moments in the same waking moment. You are kissing her, but she is kissing you. You are in a stranger's car, but you are a stranger in someone's car. You bump into someone, but someone was bumped into by you. You are heartbroken, but he broke your heart. People get to know you in a way you never get to know yourself, because you can't meet yourself. You don't get to make a first impression on yourself. You don't get to know yourself better. I don't agree, but anyways. You are merely the sum of the perceptions of friends, lovers, strangers, customer service workers. To one person, you're the moody-looking guy at table 3 who tips pretty well. To another, you're the asshole who ghosted on Tinder. To another, you're the best friend in the world. To another, you're your boyfriend's ex, a slutty bitch. Sometimes you're just a pretty girl at the grocery store checkout. Once, you were the person who ruined a telemarketer's day by taking out your anger on them. Maybe twice. One time you almost hit a cyclist with your car, but that person is the cyclist who was almost killed. You're none of those things and all of those things, and you never get to pick and you never get to know. You are an infinite number of impressions all at once. You are just a story, you are stories, live happily ever after. The idea of the poem is something that I really, really like. I do think that the poem is too long and at a certain point too repetitive. A poem on page 57, it's called Woof. And this is a classic example of Gabbie starting something amazing and something cool, but then ruining it at the last moment. The title could have also been something different, and then I wouldn't have thought about the last sentence. I'm just gonna read it so that you know what the fuck I'm talking about. It's the leash tethered to your spine, right between your shoulder blades, yanking you backward if you dare to push ahead. Welded to the vertebrae, making its presence known whether you pull away or not. You move when master moves. You run when master runs. You stay where master stays. Maybe the chain will break, maybe you'll pull hard enough, or maybe, if you're lucky, master will let you go. You move when you want to move, you run when you want to run, but you'd stay if you'd had a reason. But there's somewhere to go, the unhinged clasp aches. Freedom is not a home. You come back to master, some call this loyalty, others call it desperation. Good boy. The last sentence, good boy, I both liked and disliked. I think it's the title that's the biggest issue for me, because woof, everyone thinks about a dog immediately, so the poem is not a surprise anymore. Do you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes when you have poetry, it's nice to read a title and not know what's coming. But from the first little part, I could already tell where she was going, and I don't really like that in poems. I like to be challenged, get thrown in the deep, and find my way as I read the poem. But here it starts and ends the same way. Woof, good boy. And I don't know, maybe if the title was different, I would have liked it a little bit more. But still, I do like the poem. So let's start with some of the illustrations that I really liked. I mean, the poem is not that interesting. It just is, how many times did you think you could kill me and get away with it? What I find interesting is that there is this shape of the poem, and there's an illustration underneath that of a gorilla with a banana. And I feel like the shape of the poem is the same as the illustration, and that is visually pleasing to me. I also put a blue sticker here on page 59 with the poem Sure, and I don't like the poem, but I do like the illustration of a woman's legs with a trumpet, I think it is, on top of it. So I do really like that illustration. However, there are a lot of illustrations in this book that she recycles. And they're a little bit different, but it's still the same idea. So something that I saw design-wise, it was cool, but in execution, it just made me almost sick to my stomach. It's this poem that has a layout of a checkerboard, and the font is white or black, depending on which, square you're reading. I put a blue sticker here because I do think it's a... because I do think it's a cool design, but it was horrible to read, and I don't even know actually what the poem was about, because I wasn't paying attention to the poem, I was only paying attention to the checkered layout. So on page 89, she has this beautiful drawing of a woman with curls standing with her back to us, to the reader, and then on the next page there's the front, and she has kind of a belly, and it's a really pretty illustration. But I mean, she recycles it again, which for me makes it so that the power of the illustration gets, taken away a little bit. Another one, this time, I think it's an older woman. I can't really tell the ages of these drawings, but it's someone with sleek hair, looking a little bit older, I believe. On page 71, this is kind of fun though. I did like the whole concept of you see the page with the door and the text is all backwards, and then you turn the page and there is the poem in its full glory. But because I did not know that, I didn't turn the page yet, because I don't like to spoil the surprise of the next page usually. So I was reading the poem and I got so annoyed at the way I had to really force myself to try and read the poem, because then when I turned the page, there was the poem, the exact same poem. What would have been cool is if the poem that she wrote would have been a palindrome. Then it would have been interesting, because if you turned the page or flipped the page, the poem might have been like maybe in a different perspective, or maybe have had a completely different message. Like the same thing when there's a certain poem that when you read it from top to bottom, it tells one story, but if you do it the other way around, it tells a completely different story. She could have done the same here, but she chose not to. It's just the illustration. I still like the illustration, I still like the idea, but I just wish that she would have executed this in a more interesting way. So I believe it is time to go into my criticisms of the book. First of all, there were so many poems that were the exact same, and they were about the exact same topic. And the theme that just came back, let me see, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 27, at least of the ones that I put a sticker on, 27 of those were all about heartbreak. Like, they were all about the same topic and very similar. Like, you said the same, just with a few different words. If you have a collection of poems, don't just recycle themes over and over again, because it gets very, very tiring to read. It is a pretty long poetry book. That is quite a lot. It's quite thick to fill all this up with poems. And I just think, in general, that if you had selected more poems, very selectively put them into your book, it would have been a better experience. There are some poems that are tweet-like jokes. There's no thought-provoking text. There's no deeper meanings. It's just what she writes is what she means. For example, the poem Cordial on page 3. I broke up with my demons. We're much better off as friends. The thing is, with these tweet-like poems, I feel like I might have seen them somewhere already. I don't want to accuse her of plagiarism, but I do want to say that a lot of the things that I read in this book ring a bell from somewhere else. Let's do a negative one now, and not too negative yet, is the poem Weed on page 41. My brain is slow, but my heart is fast, so these minutes feel like forever. I mean, if you've done weed, ganja, pacalolo, whatever you want to call it, when you do certain types of weed, not all of them by the way, time does tend to stand still, or time seems to go way slower. So for example, you've been doing it for a little while, and then all of a sudden you look at the clock and it's only 7, and you're like, oh my god, the night is still so long, wow. I think that that's what she tried to capture in this poem in her previous book, where she tried to tell us that she was running out of time, and she had like this big ass poem. I forgot what it's called, but there was a lot of criticism in my previous videos comment section as well about that poem, that no one liked it. This is the opposite, right? Like, she is talking about the time takes forever, and she makes it a short poem. I'm not sure if she realizes this. That's why I put a red sticker, because I was like, but in your previous book you made it seem... Oh, I mean, I have to talk about this poem. It's called Dandelion, and it is the exact same illustration in the front. So I believe that I'm kind of forced to read this one. The poem that was... yeah, it has the title of the book I don't like, which is... When I was a little girl, my mama said to me, "What's your favorite flower, darling? I'll get you the seed." I said, "Dandelion, dandelion, that one's so pretty." She said, "Child, that one's not a flower, that one's just a weed." I still love those mellow yellow petals anyway. What's that thing they say about a rose by another name? Then my fragile flower turned into a ball of grey, so I took a breath and made a wish and blew them all away. I don't know. There's just too many poems about herself in here. And I know that this is her poem book and that she wants us to know her better, but I will come back to that later about her opening up to us, because I do have some thoughts about that, and they're not gonna be pretty. On that topic, actually, I've arrived at the poem Split on page 115 that actually talks about this, about her wanting to open up, but I feel like she's not really doing that. I'm torn between wanting to be open with my history and wanting my secrets to die with me. Between allowing someone to allow me to cry and not wanting to annoy with negativity. Between living authentically and transparently and longing so desperately for privacy. Between praying for happiness and tranquility and fearing I'll find it eventually. This is a good poem. There are poems, and I will give you an example in a second, where you say one thing in a poem and then you say the complete opposite in the next one. Here. So in the poem, I'm not gonna read it all the way because, I mean, look at this. It's fucking 3 pages long. First of all, that's too long for a poem. I know it's a story, but goddamn. It's called Bullet, and she's talking about making lists of everything, and also lists about reasons about someone special. She also makes a list about all the ways they mistreated me, all the nasty things they said to me, all the times they lied to me, all the times they hurt me, and so on and so on and so on. And she writes about that her current boyfriend finds a list of her ex-boyfriend and then becomes angry. And then she says, the assumption was that I make those lists to villainize the people I once loved, that I can only see and remember the bad parts about somebody, but it's so very much the opposite. I make my list because I was cursed at birth to see only the good in people. Oh my god, so pretentious. I don't make lists out of hate, I don't make lists out of anger, I make lists because I love you forever, but love isn't enough. I hold on to all the good parts too, I just don't need a list to remember those, which... maybe you should. Maybe that might give you more like mental therapy, because you can't only write down the things that you hate, you have to also write down things that you like. Jesus. Further along the poetry book you say, when I love someone, I love them forever. Both of us said it, neither of us meant it. But I'm like, but you just... the opposite you said. Oh yeah, something that I also don't like, let's just say it the way it is. This layout of the 2 pages, so there's always like text bubbles. She did that as well in her first poetry book. So there's one page with a text bubble and the other one also has text bubbles. I wrote it down. This comes back a whopping 17 times. So there's 32 pages of this book are just those things, like just always the same pages. And I have noticed that these do not work. They're some of the worst poems in this book. They're always like, life is full of ups and downs. Oh cool, when's the up part? It's always complaining and it's always bad. I don't like it. Here, again, like it's confidence. There's a caterpillar here, there's a butterfly there, and the caterpillar says, I miss you when you were humble, and the butterfly says, I wasn't humble, I just hated myself. There are some poems where I do like certain parts of the poem, but then the rest is just garbage. Page 172, the poem called Rides. There is this one part that I really like about the poem, and it's also like kind of highlighted. It's like separate from the rest. She's talking about suicide, by the way, and I don't think in her previous poetry book it was the poem called Snip, or what was it called? I don't remember, but it was something about cutting hair, and at the end it's like it felt like it was about suicide, but then she cut her hair and it was very not tastefully done. And I feel here it's better, but it's still not really tasteful. But there's this one part. So the last thing she said was, life will always be an up and down, a merry-go-round of good, then bad, then better, then worse. And then she says, but what if your worst is worse than your better? What if your best isn't better than your worst? What if you fall much farther than you flew? If you try to climb out, but you get buried first? I mean, that part is good. Like, I just wish that the poem would have been just that part. To get rid of some of the aggression, let's read a tiny good poem, which is called Timeless, on page 159, and it goes like this. Our hearts don't abide by the laws of time. At what age am I frozen inside your mind? I like that, but she's talking about hearts in the first couple of seconds, and then it's about the brain. This is quite a long one. It kind of reminds me of another poem in her previous book, where again the end just ruins it. The poem is called Love. Just 4 little letters describe all of you, from your nose to your toes in your tattered old shoe. I know what you're thinking. That is absurd to put such big meaning on one little word. But that's all it takes. Just 4 tiny symbols to express how I feel. It's really that simple. That's all I need, just 4 itty letters. I promise you no longer word could do better. Write a whole sentence, a paragraph, a novel. My 4-letter word is much more colossal. It traces your every hair, skin and blood cell. Just 4 teensy letters are you in a nutshell. This puny word is you as a whole. It embodies your mind, body and soul. It describes you in such a way, I proclaim, that you sign these 4 letters in place of your name. You're probably guessing the word, I bet. But if you haven't figured it out just yet, I'll spell it out for the whole world to read. These 4 little letters are C-U-N-T. I'm gonna say you didn't have to spell it out for us. I feel that the rest of the poem is fine. I'm so tired. I feel drained, honestly. If she would have thrown out those last, I say maybe 4 sentences, that she would have stopped at She should have stopped at that you sign these 4 letters in place of your name. That's where she should have stopped. And then the title of the poem should have just been like 4 underscores so that you can fill in the 4 letters. So some people would say, it's love. Some people would say, I bet it's cunt, or I get it's something else. And that would have made it more interesting because that makes me think. Let me use my brain cells. I like to think. But you're literally spelling it out for me again. And now it just lost all its power. So let us read another poem that just shows you what type of person Gabbie really is and what she thinks about herself. Because what I will read to you here comes back multiple times. And it's getting old. It was getting old in the first book and it's getting old now. The poem is called Sword. If you want me, if you miss me, no matter what you've done to my heart, I'll expose my chest to you once again. Burn me once, shame on you. Burn me twice, shame on you. Burn me 3 times. I'll let you scatter my ashes across the wasteland of your selfishness. I've tried to build armor in callousness to shield me from the relentless carelessness of the renters of my heart. But I've surrendered to the fact that I always have been and always will be this person. I'll always help people who don't deserve it. Care for people who won't return it. And fight for people who easily forget. I swim oceans for people who won't cross a teardrop for me, and if I drown, so be it. Is it a bad poem? No. Am I tired of this theme? Yes. If that's the case, if that's how you feel, then you should just find better friends. I swim oceans for people who won't cross a teardrop for me. That is very nice. That is a nice couple of sentences, but I just... Okay, something else that I wanted to say is that there is this illustration of a rat, and this rat is not a purveyor of poems or anything. It doesn't add anything to the poem on the page. For example, on page 34, the poem Ready, it says, I need a pillow to scream in, a drink to drown in, a wall to throw my fist into, because even though you're long gone, I'm just not prepared to miss you. And then there's a rat at the bottom. I think that's the first time he appears, I'm not sure. And he says, I wonder what makes God laugh. But, like, why is that rat here? I don't get it. And this rat comes back, I've counted it as well. This rat comes back 9 times in the book. Let me see if I can find the rat, and I will try to read them in order, because I'm very confused. An intermission, I hate the poem Jim. I hate it. It's on page 54 and 55. It's about a guy that is carrying the world on his shoulders, literally, and says, I can't do it, or I can't do this. And Gabbie is standing there. I mean, I believe it's Gabbie saying, is the way too much? Oh, God. Pretentious! Where is that damn rat now? Like, now I'm looking for it and I can't fucking find it. Like, is that something for her subscribers or something? Does she have a rat? Am I just not, like, aware of this fun little thing that she has going on? Okay, so I'm gonna read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rats after each other and see if it makes sense. So the first one says, the man who feasts on the destruction of others will never be full. Then the next one, I wonder what makes God laugh. Then he says, it's okay if you don't change the world, it's okay if you only change one person, it's okay if that person is you. The last one says, you can't make someone happy, you can only distract them from their plan. Those are just like live, love, laugh, or whatever order they're in. I don't have them because I'm a normal human being with values. So my camera died and I had to recharge it, and it took a while, so now it's dark outside. I was about to tell you my biggest problem with this book. So you have 220 pages full of poems, some of which are redundant, as I said before. But then you have 22 pages of just prose text with the most interesting shit ever. And apart from some things that she wrote here, she barely uses any of it in her poems. And this, when I arrived at this page 221, I kind of lost my shit, because if you want to write a poetry book where people get to know you through poetry, don't you think that it's necessary for you to just tell everything in the poems? And these are the pages where I felt most connected to you, because so many things in these 20 pages are things that I myself have also experienced in my life. How you blamed your parents for your rough start. Same. How your childhood was quite lonely. Same. Your mom was your biggest fan. I mean, being poor, a lot of troubles with food and stuff, and just one little comment of your mother made you self-conscious about your body. Same, like these are all things that are so familiar. You should have used this in your poems. This is the most interesting shit in this book, and you're not using it in your poem. Some of the sentences that you write here are poetry on its own. You did write a poem that I read about an abusive relationship, and that's a good one, but I feel like you could have gone way further. This really struck a chord with me. You said that you couldn't invite people over to your house. Same, for people that have a hard situation at home, or that are not proud of the situation that they have at home, they have troubles inviting people over because they don't want people to see what's going on. You know, maybe they don't feel safe in that home, so they don't want to invite other people that they like. Your parents called the police on you when you were misbehaving once or something. And then the last sentence here about this part, you say that was usually how it went down, a huge eruption followed by nothing. And I think that really resonates with a lot of us, because if you're in a household that has so much stress all the time, or if you're not getting along with your family all the time, and you have this silent tension all the time, and then all of a sudden it bursts and arguments occur, but then nothing happens. It doesn't get resolved. No one talks about what their contribution was to the conflict, and that's when it all becomes silent again to repeat the same process. And that's something that I think a lot of us have felt, even in families that don't have these problems. I think it's something that everyone can identify with. As a response to one of the comments on my previous video, I said that I am convinced that Gabbie has very good stories to tell, very sad stories to tell, and that she just lacks the know-how or the maturity or the skill to be able to portray them in poetry. And I feel that this book has the exact same problem, with the exception of some poems that I read to you today. I again want to applaud Gabbie of making this collection of poems, because I believe that this took a lot of work. I can truly believe that a lot of work went into this and it took a long time. But take the criticism that you're getting to heart. It's not terrible, although some poems are, you should just cut them. Even the best artists sometimes make crap, but there are some gems that you can really capitalize on, and these gems are in here. It's just you have to wade through a lot of shit to get to the good parts. If you would just see your potential in these last 20 pages, there are sentences that you could put together which would be a poem in its own, because a lot of your poems, and I know I'm rambling, but like a lot of your poems are very vague and they don't do anything for me, whereas those last 20 pages really moved me. So anyways, this was a long day, but I hope you found this video interesting as well. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this somewhat interesting, and I will see you in a next video. Bye bye.